YouTube. I just wanted to come on and talk a little bit about self-care in the context of the world that we face. I know that it has become a commodified concept, and I really kind of regret and resent that, because I think it's something that people have always done to one degree or another, especially European culture. I really can't speak to other cultures, but European culture, and then less so Americans, because of the ethos that founded our country, the ethos of the Puritans who came here to found our country, who believed that idle hands were of the devil, etc. But Europeans have a lot of traditions of self-care. The Danes have a word for it called hygeia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Hygeia, and that's the root of our, or a shared root of our word for hygiene. So physical hygiene, mental hygiene, these are all things that are part of my book and my concept of the 7 Sacraments of health that I'm trying to build a community around here. So Europeans, work like dogs. They farm, they raise animals, they grow animals, shear them, spin textiles, yarn, weave textiles. Just, where do people think our American traditions of handicraft and hard work and our ethos comes from? It comes from our European ancestry for most of us. And thank God the U.S. is a multicultural nation, and I will debate anybody on that. We are founded on immigration. And obviously we live on expropriated lands, so this we owe it to immigrants to open our borders within reason, but that's what the United States is and always was. It's a multicultural nation. But to get back to my point, our European ancestors worked very hard, and also played hard and rested hard. The whole idea of a spa comes from Europeans who would find their natural mineral springs, and they would soak in their mineral springs, or they would pour their hot baths or build their saunas and do their hot sauna and then run to the cold river or lake. And so now it's very trendy to do our ice baths, and they're very healthy. There's absolutely nothing wrong with adapting these practices for our modern times. This is where and how we live. So using these sort of trendy things for self-care, I'm on board. I think it's a great thing to do for ourselves. I want to sort of take a minute to also reflect on when something becomes commodified. Then, I think that we forget that we ourselves are part of a web of life, and we just become consumers. And this is just a driving problem in the United States and everywhere, frankly. We live in a global village dedicated to buying, selling, trading, and seizure and occupation. So I don't want to turn this into a political rant, which is sort of my tendency. But I want to reclaim self-care from its commodity status to just generally a sacrament. So can we reclaim that, understanding that our body is a temple of, for Christians, Christ, or the Holy Spirit, or for maybe ancient Hebrews, the Shekinah, the consciousness of the divine broken into fragments of the mirror that reflect one another and reflect the divine consciousness. The Atman, the Buddha. So our embodiment is sacred, and our self-care needs to be sacred. And in a time of global chaos, I think that it's more important than ever to take a few minutes to do self-care, to be responsible to our body. I know that when I don't do those things, I'm not as good of a mother. And I noticed that in my husband. He has a tendency not to do self-care. So I kind of push it on him, I'll like encourage a walk. Let's go for a walk. Okay. So he does a lot of walking because he has to, but I like to get him out just for a leisurely walk to enjoy the nature, the rest, the mindfulness, and the movement, not because he has to get to the train, but because it just feels good to move. So I just wanted to take a minute to reflect on how we can sort of use self-care. Also, you can take that few minutes when you're doing your mindfulness practice to contemplate how you can help whatever is happening. And of course, the charity is a very private thing. It's between you and the divine. But it's going to, what you choose to give to is going to reflect your values, and your values are unique to the things that you have been brought up to believe or have adopted in your belief system. And so you may want to give time to a soup kitchen. You may want to give food or money to a pantry because you don't have time. You may spend, for instance, a lot of time with the neighbor's kids who clearly don't get much time with adults. That's a way of giving too, and I try to bring mindfulness in and give some lessons when I'm doing that. That's kind of my thing, because it's what I can do, it's what I have to give. But I do that better when I've carved out time for my own exercise, meditation, hot baths, cold baths, whatever I need. And always, every day, I have my little ritual of candles, water, coffee in the morning, watering my plants, watching my cats. And because like we're YouTubing and I'm YouTubing and trying to build a community, it can turn into something performative. And I think that's what I want to include in addressing this. Like, instead of it being something that I perform for YouTube, I just want you to know that this is what I do all the time. It's what I did before YouTube. I'll do it after YouTube. But when I'm filming, yeah, I can get into that headspace of like, oh, I've got to make this look good. Okay, fair enough, it's YouTube. But then I turn it off, and it's just me and my home space and my body and my health outcomes that I'm dedicated to, and my response to the reality of aging in real time, and living consciously as a member of a global, chaotic world that's at times a nightmare. So the fact that I have a respite is like a huge privilege, and I offer gratitude for that. But also, I think we can all take time to think of a tiny way that we can maybe offer something. Doctors Without Borders will be in Gaza, you know that. There are things we can offer to Ukraine, to Russia. I don't think they're actually hurting in Russia. But there are probably at least 30 wars, including major conflicts, occupation, resistance, and civil wars happening at the moment. So if there's a cause that's dear to you, we have an immigration crisis at our southern border. There are things that each of us could perhaps do to alleviate some of the pain. And I think that to reclaim self-care from commodity and performative status, I think we can use some of our time to reflect on what's a little thing we could do to offer some of that back to the people who are displaced, for instance. It's just a thought. But I also just want to remind all of us that most of us don't have the power to affect these global events. Most of us are peons in this sort of huge prison planet experiment by power brokers of, enormous capital holding monsters who don't give a about burning the climate or destroying our lives or leveraging our basic human needs to profit them grossly. So take that self-care. It's sacred. Our embodiment is a gift, and we can honor ourselves and replenish ourselves and acknowledge that it has become a commodity, but we don't have to only let it be that. We can reclaim it, we can repurpose it, and we can use the renewed energy and focus that we get to think of ways to improve our lives, the material conditions of those who suffer, and even maybe find ways to participate in building a new way of being on the earth. And I know that's idealistic, but it's my hope. So remember to hydrate. Remember to meditate. Remember to just enjoy yourself. It's almost Halloween. Have a blast. It's autumn. It's beautiful. Get out for a walk. Gather some leaves with some kids. Do something fun. Enjoy yourself. And while you're doing that, just give thanks. Be grateful, and maybe consider ways that we each can do whatever it is that we have to offer back to our community. And trust that even the little bit that you give to even just your neighbors will have a knock-on effect. It will flavor the soup. So here's to flavoring the soup. I invite you to take a minute to comment down below your thoughts on self-care and whether we can reclaim it from commodity status, if you think it's selfish, if you think it's caring, and anything that you have to say about what I had to say. I welcome your input, and thank you again for being here.